Hello everybody, David Schuster here. Just a few weeks until Election Day, and now for both presidential campaigns, it's all about momentum and turnout. Campaigns need a winning message, but they also need a strong organization to get their supporters to the polls. Every successful organization depends on enthusiasm. And so now there's a growing effort by Republicans to try and dampen Democratic enthusiasm and ramp it up for the GOP. It involves alleged polling. And I say alleged because many of the Republican polling organizations in key battleground states the past week have been dubious and unscientific. They don't even meet the basic requirements of statistics. But this isn't about math, it's about emotions. And Republicans are flooding the zone as part of a strategy to make the Trump campaign appear in better shape than it actually is. This tactic has been used in previous campaigns, but never quite as intensely as we are seeing in 2024. Republicans are using their appearance of momentum to sway undecided voters and demoralize Democrats. And unfortunately, it is having an impact. Many Democrats are falling for the narrative, getting the increasingly anxious and nervous about Kamala Harris's chances of winning. Most of the mainstream media is not helping by reporting all polls and polling averages instead of focusing on just the most credible and reliable ones. One of the more reliable polls by the Washington Post just found that Kamala Harris is beating Donald Trump in key battleground states by 4 points in Georgia, 2 in Michigan, 2 in Pennsylvania, and 3 in Wisconsin. The poll found Trump and Harris tied in Nevada. In other words, Kamala Harris is clearly winning nationally and winning, according to the Washington Post, in key battleground states. But conservative media is still trotting out all kinds of dubious surveys to energize Republicans. Remarkably, Fox News recently invited on Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders to get his take.
Do you agree that Kamala Harris is losing some momentum? And what is her message to voters right now?
Well, I was out in Michigan and Wisconsin. We had rather huge crowds of young people, of trade unionists, so I don't believe that's the case. I think, look, the average American is angry. They're seeing the very richest people in this country becoming richer, while 60% of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. Over the last 50 years, wages have been stagnant. And what I think ordinary Americans are saying is, you know what? What about an economy and a government that works for all of us, not just the 1%? What about an economy in which we do not have 3 people on top owning more wealth than the bottom half of American society? What about an economy in which we join the rest of the industrialized world, guarantee health care to all people as a human right, and where we don't pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs? Those are the issues, I think, Maria, that are galvanizing the American people. And I think if you look at those issues, people are going to turn out and vote for Kamala Harris.
Indeed, on the issues of economic inequality, healthcare, and prescription drugs, Kamala Harris and the Democrats are ahead. The Democrats are also ahead on issues of character, trust, and stability. Donald Trump keeps digging his grave deeper on those concerns, and it's putting other Republicans in a very difficult position. Here's Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson on CNN.
Donald Trump's campaign suggested he would begin previewing his closing argument Saturday night with Election Day barely 2 weeks away. But the former president kicked off his rally with a detailed story about Arnold Palmer, at one point even praising the late legendary golfer's genitalia, unquote. Mr. Speaker, you're crossing all over the country. You're working hard to get Republicans over the line in this election. You're talking about substantive issues. Is this really the closing message you want voters to hear from Donald Trump? Stories about Arnold Palmer's penis?
Well, listen, I think that the headline that I read about the rally in Pennsylvania yesterday was the big question, and it's the one that Kamala Harris has not been able or willing to answer, and that is, are you better off now than you were under the Trump administration 4 years ago? And no one can answer that question with a yes. I mean, no one. And that's why Kamala Harris herself avoids the question. Look, I've been traveling the country nonstop, Jake. I've been in over 230 cities in 40 states right now. And I'm spending these final closing weeks in the swing states, in blue states, in toss-up districts for the House. I'm absolutely convinced. There's an energy out there right now. I'm convinced that we are going to win the White House, the Senate, and the House.
Did you notice how Speaker Johnson didn't even blink or bat an eyelash? It goes to show that Republican leaders have become so used to Donald Trump's weird, unhinged obsessions that nothing Trump says can usually fluster these Republican leaders. Republicans, at least most of them, just pivot to whatever they want to talk about and never acknowledge that Donald Trump is unhelpful, erratic, and strange. It's almost frightening how little emotion many of these Republicans show when asked about Donald Trump. But clearly, that is a survival strategy. And when pinned down on Trump describing Democrats as an enemy within, as Trump has done repeatedly the last several days, Republicans insist Donald Trump is talking about something else.
Look, Trump is talking about restoring law and order, and I'm telling you, you can mock it. People in the media can mock it, but that resonates with the American people. They are sick of being afraid on the streets of their cities. Donald Trump can bring order back to the chaos. They know that. So they're willing to give a little on his, social media posts and some fun language he uses at rallies.
He called January 6th a day of love. He said that the January 6th criminals, the prisoners who violently attacked your place of work, he compared them to the victims of Japanese internment camps. And that guy is in favor of law and order?
Yes, President Trump had and kept law and order. When he says at the campaign rallies that
Except on
we
January
didn't have
6th.
hot wars around the globe during his administration. No, look, he's right. Russia did not invade Ukraine under his watch. Israel was not attacked viciously by Iran and its proxies because they were afraid to do so under that commander-in-chief, under President Trump.
So law and order, according to Speaker Johnson, includes foreign adversaries being afraid of the United States. It is a stretch compared to how most people talk about U.S. foreign policy, what most people associate in the United States with law and order. Still, Speaker Johnson is trying to make the proverbial chicken salad out of chicken. And given Donald Trump's felony convictions, his pending federal criminal cases, and lawsuit payouts, one can appreciate the verbal gymnastics required to describe Donald Trump as the law and order candidate. There are basically two different strategies for most Republicans who find themselves in this position. They can insist that certain words do not mean what Donald Trump says they mean. So as you just heard, law and order doesn't apply to criminal activity in the United States. It means avoiding international armed conflicts. Or Republicans can simply ignore the question entirely and just pivot to something else, like Biden administration policies. Speaker Johnson is pretty skilled at doing both, but he underscores the clear desperation that the GOP has in distancing itself from Donald Trump's personal and legal baggage and from Donald Trump's tyrannical rhetoric. The effort by Johnson to deflect shows certain weaknesses in the GOP, and one gets the sense that even Speaker Johnson knows that any conversation that focuses on Donald Trump's unhinged screeds as opposed to Democratic policies is a conversation where the GOP is on defense. And campaigns that are on defense almost never gain ground. They usually only lose it. What's also telling in all of this is how shameless the Republican Party has become in its pursuit of power. The Republican Party has proven repeatedly that it is willing to throw out shame and integrity, throw it out the window to keep from criticizing Donald Trump. The GOP's willingness to shift narratives, ignore scandals, and bend over backwards for Donald Trump and whoever else might help Republicans gain power speaks to a party that has clearly lost its moral compass. Now, maybe politics has always put a premium on expediency over integrity, but the expediency and lack of honesty from the Republican Party in this election has been staggering. And by the way, Donald Trump's legal challenges are growing. He's now facing another lawsuit.
Former President Trump is facing a new legal battle. Members of the Central Park Five are now suing the former president over, quote, false and defamatory statements they say that he made about their 1989 case during a presidential debate last month.
The key in this is not what happened in 1989, but rather what Donald Trump said about the Central Park Five in the last presidential debate. Trump insisted the men killed a person and pleaded guilty. Both claims were false, and now the question is whether the Trump false claims amount to defamation.
So the Central Park Five now say that he is saying these things as a way to cause distress to them because they were exonerated ultimately. They had ultimately settled with New York City after being forced into giving false statements. They had gone to trial. And they are all saying now they never pleaded guilty. They were cleared of the wrongdoing. No one was killed in this attack in 1989. And this has been a pattern from Donald Trump dating the whole way back to the aftermath of that attack when these men were arrested, that he has wanted to intentionally harm them and cause them distress. And one of the plaintiffs, one of the men in the Central Park Five, he was at that debate in Philadelphia and even tried to approach Trump. And they had what he said, or what his attorneys say, was they wanted to have some sort of polite discourse about what Trump had said in the moment on national television about these exonerated men. And Trump essentially blew him off. He wouldn't engage with them. So this lawsuit is a defamation case that they're bringing now to try and say, you know, make us whole, stop intentionally lying, stop intentionally harming us. And of course, the context here is right before the campaign. There's quite an ongoing appeal among the campaigns to black men specifically, a lot of discussion about crime. And then also in this context, Donald Trump has been found liable for defamation before against E. Jean Carroll.
So once again, Donald Trump says things off the cuff or intentionally that are not true. And now Trump will again face more consequences, eventually, this time through another civil lawsuit. It's more evidence that Donald Trump has no discipline and seems to lack the cognitive ability to speak honestly or accurately. Trump cannot seem to get out of his own way. And while it may be entertaining and amusing at times in the context of civil lawsuits and defamation cases against him, Trump's sloppiness and narcissism could have major consequences for issues of U.S. national security and safety. Most Americans, I believe, understand that connection and recognize that Trump's behavior is not healthy or helpful for our nation. We began this video by talking about misleading Republican polling organizations. Well, one of the more credible nonpartisan polling groups has found that Trump's unhinged meltdowns the last several weeks and months are making an impact on the electorate. Emerson polling found that out of voters who made their decision in the last month or last week, 60% are voting for Kamala Harris to 36% for Donald Trump. In other words, people who are only now, weeks before the election, tuning in or paying attention to Donald Trump do not like what they're hearing. I'm David Schuster. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for watching that video. We really appreciate it, guys. And we appreciate it if you become members because that allows us to be independent, honest, progressive, all the things that you don't get from corporate media. And all of that is because of you guys. Hit the join button below and become one of us. Become a young Turk.